A Letter to the Griffin Emperor on the Matter of War by Wages of Sin. Dear Emperor Tailfeather,
Dear Emperor Tailfeather, while I am aware of the tensions between our nations, I am at a loss for what, affronts, you reference in your missive. If you would like to open diplomatic channels in regard to any grievances, we would be happy to receive them. Otherwise, we must reject your offers to, accept our unconditional surrender, . While a fair offer in the face of your alternative offer of, absolute annihilation, once again I must repeat that we will, take our chances, as one might say. Or, in fact, to the opposite, may suggest that you do not initiate such a plan for your own well-being. As to not allow my turnabout to be mistaken for hubris, I have constructed a list of reasons for such an action to be inconvenient, detrimental, devastating, or outright apocalyptic for you. First is the issue of the pony power. The Griffonian military is impressive. Reports placing its structure as comprising of as much as 1/6 of the total population. But while that greatly dwarfs ours on paper, as we effectively do not have one outside of wartime, and then only by volunteering, the difference must be considered, not as to what our army is, but what it will be. Projecting from past statistics, the cultural significance of military service to the Pegasi historically inclines 1/6 of the population to volunteer for service, composing the majority of our combat troops. Half that number of the Earth Pony community, about 1/12 of the Earth Pony population, typically conscripts most to provide non-combat support, the least by total number. Typically, some of the unicorn population due to their innately weaker physical stature and the relative scarcity of combat-trained spellcasters. Those unicorns that are trained in offensive or defensive magic, though, provide force-multiplying support and, especially powerful unicorns, possess the power to single-hoofedly defend, or otherwise, entire cities. Through the prevalence of food, advanced magical and traditional medical care, and generally lower infant mortality rates, Equestria has a population triple that of Griffonian, resulting in its theoretical military capacity actually marginally exceeding that of Griffonia's. So, outright conflict would be inadvisable, as we would be defending and have the, home field advantage, as it were. Furthermore, while Griffonia's isolationist policies have effectively spurned any attempt at alliances, Equestria has built relations with every nation of sentient beings on the planet, many of which would provide aid in our defense. The Crystal Empire has sworn full allied mobilization, as have the Minotaurs. Zebracadia has pledged food, supplies, and the Saddle Arabians have pledged monetary resources. Furthermore, in the face of destruction of their only viable food source, I'm sure the changelings would take subversive actions against you in defense. And of course, as you should know, the balance of world power is challenged. The dragons will see fit that it is re-established. Our overwhelmingly military resources don't really matter, though, as it would never get that far anyway. Allow me to tell you why. First, we have the forces of nature on our side. For example, it is very difficult to invade while there is a constant hurricane on the border, assuming we stop it there. Second, it is difficult to support a war without food, and if Equestria were to embargo our exports of food, Griffonia's own production would not be able to support its own population, let alone a war effort. Third, assuming you did not have enough food, you would have no way of transporting it effectively. Our supply lines have structured around our nation's Earth Pony supply population, as their innate strength allows them to transport massive amounts of food by land. An entirely Griffin force, though, would be unable to transport anywhere near as much. They would be overburdened for flight, carrying more than a day or two supply. So unless a disproportionately high number of troops were devoted to the task of transporting by land, the very act of sending troops across the natural barriers between our nations would starve your forces out. But if you ignored these facts and war were to start, you would not only have to contest the aforementioned coalitions and conditions, but some insurmountable trump cards. The go-to trump card of Equestria has historically been the elements of harmony, items regarded as the most powerful force in existence. If retrieved, they could be utilized to an unexpected effect, which would unquestionably result in, quote, harmony, unquote, in some form through your repulsion, imprisonment in stone, banishment to the moon, etc. While not distinctly equestrian, the crystal heart would be utilized in our defense. It is, if you are unaware, an item capable of projecting a shield large enough to surround nations, and powerful enough to repulse any outside threat indefinitely. On the front of trump card abilities, we are capable of producing the sonic rainboom effect. If you are unaware, this event is a metaphysical disturbance wave propagation, which is a technical term for what you may better classify as a magical EMP that would disable any magical devices and overload any spells within a substantial radius. I am aware of Grifonia's general lack of magical devices, but if you did have any intention of using magical weapons or enhancements, it should be known that they would not be of use for long. While there are many other magical items and abilities that could be mentioned, the list would go on nearly indefinitely. So, for the sake of brevity, I will leave it at just these three, as these are just the most well-known and relevant to defense. If this outlining our defense capabilities was not to sway you, and everything I have mentioned above was somehow rendered impotent, and you did successfully annihilate us, you would have then to contest in life without ponies, a more daunting task than you may imagine, considering what would remain. Equestria boasts 4 immortals: Celestia, Discord, Luna, and myself. In the face of our ponies' deaths, undoubtedly a terrible fate would befall those who had harmed them. And this is no unsubstantiated claim. You would suffer. Luna, the Princess of the Moon and Night, once threatened to basically destroy the world because she was not being appreciated by ponies. If you intended to kill those ponies whose admiration keeps the wrath of a nightmare at bay, I shudder to imagine what force she would bring to bear against you. I cannot say what Celestia would do, but if the nation she has spent an era creating and nurturing were to be destroyed, I have little doubt that her mind may be taken by a nightmare similar to Luna's. That would place 2 dark magic enhanced immortal alicorns bent on revenge at your proverbial throats. If that were also not enough, Discord, god of chaos, has recently taken up residence in Equestria and has shown bonds with ponies he values enough to deny his fundamental nature. I cannot gauge his full power, but it should be pointed out, as you should well know, he once ruled the entire planet, subjugating and terrorizing all species for his amusement. If those he values were to be forcibly taken from him, I dare say his wrath against the guilty would be quite unpleasant, to say the least. As the youngest and least studied of the immortals of Equestria, my reaction to the destruction of our nation can only be judged on projections of my mental state, as assumed to carry over from my time as a mortal. As much as I would dislike putting it in writing, it would be a lie to say I was, or am, entirely stable. In the face of the same stimulus, I fear I would simply go insane before a nightmare form could overtake me. While this may result in my incapacitation, my other episodes of insanity have proven more proactive. That is to say, I may seek indiscriminate revenge, possibly also utilizing the dark magic I have recently learned from my mentor, and about with the entity formerly known as Lord Sombra. And finally, just for the sake of argument, if you did manage to kill our immortals, it must be remembered that the very rotation of the celestial sphere has fallen under the charge of ponies since the time of creation. The sun and moon have always been risen and set by ponies, and without ponies to guide their motion, they would cease to revolve. No organic life would survive beyond a year, as the sun-facing side cooked off all moisture and the dark side froze to the point that even its oxygen began to condense to liquid. I suppose it would also be relevant to mention that Discord and I are both bonded to universal forces, chaos and magic respectively, and as such there is the odd possibility that our deaths could destabilize all reality, or rather quite possibly, all of all realities. Just thought you should know. Twilight Sparkle.